You could see this little black box on your virtual toolbox. Uh, just then read the lines on this small window carefully. After you downloaded an open virtual machine, you should download the SaaS University. You should create an account on the SaaS University Edition and follow the step 2 and download the 2 GB file. So after you found see this little black box, find your browser, and also you could see the for the previous question, you could see the second step of download on the SaaS University Edition website, and just click the download here to make sure that your SaaS studio is working well. Type in localhost as instructed on the little black window and try to click on Start SaaS Studio. Wait for a couple of minutes. It might take still quite some time to log on to the SaaS Studio. Whatever is fine for the company or organization. I think the SaaS community will identify your school email automatically. Just whatever is fine. For the VirtualBox installation, you had better check on your operating systems, find the correct edition. Oh. Typically, after you have if you have see if you have found the signs saying sign in, it means that your downloading of your SaaS University Edition is successful. Typically, it might take quite some time for it to sign into a SaaS Studio because it will typically will take a lot of like your internet usage. You know, it is always online edition. So in the latter lecture, I will put on the coding part into a separate YouTube video so that it won't fail if I'm trying to use Zoom and SaaStudio together. It might be quite slow. So now let's take a couple of minutes. If you have some more questions on the installation, you could ask for now. Okay, now let's move on to the um, some basic operations on the SaaS software. The SaaS interface will contain three different windows. The program editor window. It is also the one you will see on your SaaS Studio. And the output window is where the results of a program is shown. And also there is a log window to record your current SaaS session, and it will return some messages or warnings um, which is generated by your program. So let's see, look at our a very simple basic example on the SaaS software. The SaaS software typically will contain data steps and procedure steps. The data step is where you input your data set, and the procedure is step is where you analyze your current data set. For example, in this current example, you have to type in the data set name and identify your variables and also input your data set. And you could use your procedure step to analyze the data set. Here, the print procedure step is where you analyze um, your current data set. Here, the print procedure will print some variables of your current data set. The SAS language is organized into steps, which are like paragraphs. There are two types of steps. The data step is where you create a data set, and the procedure step is where you analyze the data created by the data step. Always notice that the SAS steps will consist of different statements, and always remember to use space to separate your codes. And the case of command does not matter in SAS, and a semicolon is required to denote the end of the statement. And always remember to use a consistent layout pattern uh, for your programs to be easier to read and debug. Now let's move with the data step. The general form of data step will contain the name of your data set, which you will put here, and you will use the input statement to to indicate your variables, and use the data line statement to separate your input statement and the actual data set. And always remember to put a semicolon at the end to prevent from further grammar warnings. And always remember to use to put a run with a semicolon to put your code into use. Here are some of the naming rules for the data step. The variables and the name of the data set will allow combinations of numbers, letters, or underscores. And you should always begin with letters or underscores. And there is no length limit for your name of data set. And always be careful of certain special variable names that is reserved by SAS, such as the indicator of numerical value, indicator of null value in your program. The input statement names the variables in your data set and tells SAS where the values of the variables can be found. Three major variations are for the input statement: the list input, column input, and the formatted input. Variables can be either numerical character, and the character variables will involve the use of the dollar sign. Dollar sign here. Here is a very simple data set which looks like this. It contains the name, the the name of a person, his or her weight, and his three records for jumps. Now let's begin with the most simplest way, which is a list input. In your input statement, you have to indicate the name of a variable. The first one is name, which is character value. That means you should follow it with a dollar sign and the weight variable and the 3 jump variables, which are all numerical. And after the data line statement, you have to type in your data. Remember, do not put a semicolon in each line of your inputted data. The semicolon is only used after you have inputted all your data set. Here are some notes. A simple decimal point denotes a missing value in your data set, and the dollar sign denotes the previous variable is a character. Here the dollar sign is put here, means the name variable is character, and the other 4 variables do not have a dollar sign after them, which means they are all of numerical values. If you have more than one data point recorded on each line, it is not necessary to reformat the data. Simply add and double add at the end of each input line. Now let's look at this example. On each line in your program, it will contain 2 different records for your data. The data set is the same as before, only the formatting is different. So we put the first and the second record for data into the same line. To allow these multiple inputs in your data set, a double add is necessary at the end of the input statement after all your name of variables. List character string must be simple, no embedded space, no longer than, and also it will allow for no longer than 8 characters. The PowerPoint and all the example codes will be put onto Canvas. And also, no special format is allowed. That is typical date format, time format, etc. will not be allowed in a standard list input statement. And always remember to separate by space or spaces in your input data. That is, do not neglect this simple space between between different variables. Here are the results of the previous code. Now we should move on to the column input for the data step. It is the same as the previous list input format. Only the input statement part is different. After your name of the variables and the dollar sign indicating that it is a character variable, the 1 to 5 here means that the name variable will take up the place from the first column to the 5th column. And this is same for the second variable weight without a dollar sign, as it is of numerical values. 7 to 9 here means that the weight variable will take up the 7th to the 9th column in your data set. That you can count that it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for name, and the 6th is left for blank, and from 7 to 9 will be the second variable, and followed by a single space, and from 11 to 13 here means the variable jump 1. So here are some tips about when to use the column input, the column format input. When the values are not all separated by spaces, but each of the variables value is always found in the same space in each data line, and all the variables are standard numerical or character strings, and the blank spaces appear in the character string. Now let's move on to the final format. When you input our data, it is also the same data set and using the same input statement. Here, the @1 means the name variable will start from the first column and the 5 with a decimal point after the dollar sign, indicating that the first variable name will take up 5 places, 5 columns. And at 7 here means all the 4 variables will start at the 7th column here, and the 4.1 after the bracket of your 4 variables means that for each of the 4 variables, it will take up 4 columns, and which will allow for 1 decimal points. You can look at here, it's 2.3. So if you input 2.32, it will automatically change to 2.3 as the decimal point is 1 here, indicating that it will only allow for 1 decimal point and a total of 4. The character 11 here means we will treat the rest starting after all the 4 variables. The variable will take up 11 places, and it should be treated as a character variable. Since starting from here, and we count to 11, and all these 11 columns will belong to the birthday variable, which takes exactly 11 columns, and it is treated as a character value. Now we finally move on to the procedure step. And all procedures in SAS will start with the keyword PROC. Always remember to use uppercase, and followed by the name of the procedure, such as print, which is print, and the sort or content, etc. And each procedure step has its own unique form with its list of options. Here are some options that is common for all procedure steps, and some will also be available in the data steps. An option statement is used to define an environment for the program. It usually appears at the beginning of the program outside of the procedure steps and data steps. It will change the default settings. The line size defines the number of characters that will be printed across the width of each page. Example ranges from 16.4 to 256. The page size statement defines the number of lines that will be printed down the length of each page. Acceptable ranges are from 15 through this one, and the node center writes all the output in the log and the listing files will be published on FlashDev, and the notice statement will allow the SAS Studio not to print the date in the output, and the no number and options means that the SAS program won't print the page number in the output. In the final part of this lecture, we will introduce the basic and the most simple procedure step in the SAS software, the print procedure, which will print certain data set with certain variables. After the keyword procedure, you put the print keyword in your procedure step and indicate your data name of a data set after the data keyword, and use the var, which is a variable statement, to identify the variables you want to output. And the by statement allows you to print the data set according to some variables. And also move back to our ToadJump example data set. If we run the procedure step with a print keyword and specify the name of data set for ToadJump, and specify the name of the variables var, followed by the 3 different variables, name, weight, and birthday, we will see in the output window of our data set, but with only 3 variables. This column of name, the column of weight, and the final column of the birthday. So the print procedure step is the most easiest one. And in the following lectures, we will cover more on the other different procedure steps, which are most usually used. So that's for today, all for today's lecture, and all the PowerPoints, the example codes, and other videos will also be posted on the Canvas website. And also pay attention on the announcement section on the on the Canvas system. It will tell you about the time for uh, office hours and also the files for your homework and etc. Thanks for today's attendance. See you next week.